Leave me alone!
Monoquantum is the idea of a composition that was made all the way back in 1.2, the same patch that Silverwolf was released in. People, including myself, had high hopes for this team. But fast forward 10 patches later, and the ideal team composition still hasn't seen the light of day. The reason for this is that there isn't a quantum carry that wants Silverwolf on the team. Sila right now would prefer running Tingyun due to Sila being reliant on kills, and that the energy Tingyun provides allows Sila to gain extra turns from her ultimate. Xie is a hybrid breaker that honestly would have been a great quantum carry if she were a 5-star. She benefits off Sparkle's crit and damage percent buffs, as well as Silverwolf's debuffs due to Xie's somewhat relevant entanglement damage. However, her numbers and mechanics simply aren't up to par with the current MOC standards. That leaves us with our last candidate, Qingque. I'd say she's the best one to run with Sparkle Silverwolf. Due to her heavy SP costs, Sparkle's a great pick with her, and since Qingque has massive attack percent and damage percent buffs built into her kit, Tingyun's buffs are a bit diluted when you stack them alongside Sparkle's buffs. Tingyun still pulls ahead of Silverwolf if the enemies are already weak to Quantum though. Qingque's damage is respectable and big enough to be able to clear MOC and Apocalyptic Shadow within 4 to 6 cycles, but I somewhat doubt that it will stay the same in the upcoming patches. The content is getting harder and the HP of the enemies is inflating every other patch. Hello, my name is Kyte and I usually just talk about the current meta of Star Rail, but today we will be doing a bit of a thought experiment. So the question is, why were people so entranced by this idea of a team comp? What exactly went wrong? And what kind of character would be able to save and fix Monoquantum for good? Let's start with the first question. Why Monoquantum? Let's rewind all the way back. It's July 2023 and I just released a video guide detailing how Silverwolf cannot be power crept. A bold statement. The main reason why I thought as such was because implanting seemed like such a unique mechanic that would only be used for Silverwolf due to her lore with ether editing. Implanting weaknesses at the time seemed like a way to effectively brute force content with the one team, without worrying about matching weaknesses to your enemy at all. The only problem is that you need your whole team to be quantum to guarantee that quantum implant. If you had any other element on your team, there's a chance she would implant that weakness instead. You could match your off-element teammate to the weakness of your enemy, but that would be going against the one team brute forces all content idea. Next was that Respen was quite a rare and valuable stat that gives another dimension of multiplicative scaling to your team. If you don't know what that means, let's say you have 1000 attack, right? If you're given a chance between 100% attack increase or a 50% attack increase and a 50% Respen, you'd rather have the two 50% increases, despite both increases totaling 100%. The final piece from that era is the Quantum set. I'm sure you've heard of it as it's been recommended for a lot of units who aren't Quantum. It gives 10% Quantum damage, but the important part is the 4-piece effect. It gives 10% Def Ignore and 20% Def Ignore instead if the enemy is weak to Quantum. This synergizes both with Silverwolf's Quantum implants and the fact that Def Shred scales asymptotically, meaning that it gets more valuable the more you have of it. On the next patch, they would gain their next members, who were Fuxuan and Lynx. Both, however, were sustainers, so it really wasn't that effective. It's only in 2.0 with Sparkle's release we would actually see the final team. Sparkle buffed crit damage, damage percent, and provides a good amount of SP to her team. And the most synergistic thing she has with Monoquantum is her trace named Nocturne, which increases her Quantum team members' attack depending on how many Quantum teammates there are. In all honesty, this 30% attack increase is extremely pitiable, and from here on, we can see why Monoquantum never flourished. This entire concept was piggybacking off the fact that only Silverwolf had an implant. Now, Firefly and Boothill have implants of their own, and Respen is now an accessible stat to your full team due to Ruin May's ultimate and Robin and Sunday's E1. Silverwolf's niches have now been somewhat covered, and there are only 2 slots left that she can fit in this current meta. Those two are Dr. Ratio and Acheron team comps. debuffs. To add to this, she carries the burden of being a nihility character in a meta where harmonies dominate the flex slots. I go in extensive detail about this in my 2 videos, so go watch them after this video if you're interested. For the purposes of this video, all you need to know is that Silverwolf's debuffs are just way too small when compared to harmonies that provide way more buffs. Silverwolf is only relevant through gimmicks that inherently want you to use debuffs and reward you big time if you do. If you meet Dr. Ratio's 3 debuff requirement, he launches massive amounts of motion value or MV every turn, and Acheron's ultimate can only be activated with debuff application. And you might ask, what do any of these things have to do with Mono Quantum? Well, this gives us all the insights we need to fix it. Once again, hoyoverse doesn't really like to buff or nerf characters directly. The only time they do that is if China makes enough of a ruckus about it. Nuvolette and Zhongli are 2 prime examples that come to mind. I don't see them rallying behind Silverwolf anytime soon, so I won't suggest any specific character changes. We can't release a new tailored DPS relic because the Quantum set is already extremely valuable, honestly. And Sparkle is already getting a damn good set for herself in the next patch. A dedicated relic set to Silverwolf is a little bleak, so making one for supportive debuffers might just be the play. The 2-piece effect for this set can just be a standard plus 12 effect hit rate, while the 4-piece is going to proc whenever the wearer applies a debuff. This could range anywhere from a 10% death shred, 10% vulnerability, or anything of the sort. But for the purposes of this video, and for the set to benefit Silverwolf the most, it's going to be whenever the wearer applies a debuff, the wearer regenerates 3 energy. It looks a little underwhelming, but this allows her to do a 2-turn ultimate with tutorial or her E1, and just barely allowing her to do a 1-turn ultimate if she has both and a smidge of external energy. This takes care of her ultimate application and uptime, and this will help in taking down 2 elites at once. At the same time, this exact number that I chose, 3 energy, does not break any other character as far as my testing and calculations went. Both Pela and Zhao Cho already have good energy rotations, so this can alleviate some pressure off their energy ropes and 5% ERR planers, but they don't gain any new breakpoints off of it. This relic also won't be breaking any of the dot units since they would usually prefer the prison set, but they might take it for higher ultimate uptime for pure fiction. Can you tell that I'm surgically making these things so I don't break anything in the game? Not to gas myself up, but man, there's a lot of systems to keep track of. Having a new light cone for Silverwolf could potentially happen down the line. We have already seen this happen with Yunli's cone becoming Clara's new best in slot, but it's a little hard to beat when the tutorial mission starts and there's Sig, so that leaves us with one last option. I need to make a character that is tailored to be the main carry for the Sparkle Silverwolf team. That's right, I'll be making my Honkai Star Rail OC. Please do not steal. If you've been enjoying my content thus far, please subscribe. I really want to hit 1k subs by the end of this year, and if you do, I promise that I'll keep making better content for you. Thanks, genuinely, thank you. First thing is that our carry needs to scale with crit, attack percent, and damage percent due to Sparkle's buffs and Feixiao's crit rate increase. We also want the character to be SP negative, since Sparkle already provides a decent amount of SP to begin with. Also, I'm not good with names, and I looked up names meaning dreams, but I couldn't find one I was satisfied with, so it's just me. My basic and skill deal quantum damage and bounce. Give a character motion values, and they'll immediately scale with all of the normal stats. But here's the thing, if he just made a bland, high MV character with no other notable features, we would go back into wanting to run Sparkle Tingyun instead of Sparkle Silverwolf. So, we need to motivate the player to run debuffs and capitalize on the fact that the unit is quantum. We'll want to use entanglement since that is something that is unique to quantum. Talent, pressure mounting. My bounce attacks deal damage 1 extra time for every 2 debuffs placed on the enemy, up to a maximum of 3 bounces. These attacks also have a chance to slow the target and increase the damage they receive up to 5 times. This is very similar to Dr. Ratio's follow-up talent, the difference being that this isn't a follow-up attack. With this, the total MV for skill becomes 405. Compared to Dr. Ratio, he deals 420. Nice. The edge that I have though is that my basics will deal 200 MV if the debuff requirements are met, allowing for a sub-DPS playstyle. Now that we've taken care of the debuff requirements, we can now move on trying to get Entangle to work. The thing with Entanglement is that it scales off break effect, and you need to stack it up with 5 different actions to deal more damage. The 5 action requirement isn't much of a problem with Silverwolf and Feixiao, but it's a little hard to justify building break effect on a crit scaling hypercarry. So, the way we do this is through a conversion trace, much like Yi, Firefly, and Bootil. Ascension 2 trace, Destructive Criticism. My crit damage increases by an amount equal to 35% of break effect, and my break effect increases by 35% of crit damage. Now, this may look like an infinite loop, but these two bonuses do not stack with each other, much like Vladimir's passive in League of Legends. For those unfamiliar, we can see this in Bronya and Sparkle, where their crit buffs do not increase the other's crit damage scaling when they use their buffs on one another. There's no infinite scaling here, officer. This trace might look broken to you, but I did the math and the value is equal to Bootil's passive. Now, we can use this to fuel my ultimate, Abyssal Revelation. It costs 140 energy to cast, and it is a multi-sequence attack. All of these attacks have a chance to imply entanglement, much like how Welt's ultimate forces imprisonment onto his enemies. But the key part of this kit is that enemies will receive 25% of their current entanglement upon getting attacked. Since entanglement takes some time to ramp up, it actually takes 6 whole actions to reproc 100% of the entanglement. So think of this as like Kafka's dot reprocs, but instead, the whole team needs to be attacking for it to be irrelevant. For the multi-sequence attacks, introduction deals AoE damage, and rising action deals bounce damage. I think this sequence of attacks will be similar to Acheron's ultimate animation, but it will be interrupted in the middle. Once climax occurs, I can consume as much SP as I want to launch my skill that many times. This is a way to be able to dump all of the SP Sparkle generates at once, and once that's finished, conclusion will deal single target damage. I imagine this part of the sequence to look like Feixiao's ultimate, where you can repeatedly press E to cast skill multiple times, and then you can press Q or basic attack to finish with the conclusion. It's important to note that using SP in this state will regenerate energy, so if you burn 4 whole SP, I'll be able to cast the ultimate again right after. Due to this, I think setting my max energy to 280 would be good, so that I can make full use of Sparkle's 7 SP bar without overflowing too much energy. The total single target MV for this ultimate is 470, which is low, especially for its energy cost, since a lot of the damage is going to come from the entanglement reprocs. And there we have it. The core of the character has been finished. You could potentially execute this idea in multiple ways, and Hoyo might release a character that's completely different from mine. But to create a monoquantum carry, it will always have to hinge on incentivizing debuffs and being able to scale off Sparkle. But since we're already here, let's have some fun designing the rest of this character. Technique: the stage is set. I think a special dimension that applies entanglement at the start of combat is good enough, as it'll allow me to ramp up damage from the very beginning. For the trace passives, I think Destructive Criticism is already such an impactful trace, so I think these should just be ribbon features so that it's balanced. Stealing Strategies is Payless EHR trace, and Hamardia gives a bit of break efficiency, which can somewhat be relevant, but it's not that impactful. I'll pick 2 useful stat traces, being crit rate and break effect, and an HP % stat trace to balance it out. Now that we're finished with the character, let's get into vertical investment. Signature Light Cone, Slaying the Big Bad Evil Guy. This Light Cone increases break effect and crit damage, and when the wearer delays an enemy's action, they will be afflicted with vulnerability. The fact that you need to slow down your enemy, and that the wearer has to perform with break effect, makes this Light Cone pretty niche beyond its intended use. Break effect wealth, anyone? And for the Eidolons, Land of Phantasms gives rest reduction during entanglement. I made it smaller than Robin's E1 because I'm already enjoying a 10% rest spend from Silverwolf. False Equivalence is essentially Doctor Ratio Summation, but it increases attack and damage %. Peer Pressure applies entanglement or pressure to adjacent enemies on death, so that it isn't absolutely abhorrent to reapply them at higher tiers of play. And at the end of the hero's journey, entangled enemies' actions are delayed further and their vulnerability is increased. And with that, the entire character kit is made. I have a Google Doc in the description if you want to see it in a more readable form. Thank you for watching, even if this is something that's outside of the norm of my videos. Once again, please subscribe if you enjoyed this type of thing. If you noticed, I also did my best to juggle quite literally all of the stats in this kit, from crit, attack %, damage %, break effect, and vuln, are all at a somewhat even level so that none of them are diluted. There's also no def shred whatsoever on this guy because Sparkle E2, Silverwolf, and Quantum Set already contribute like 97% def shred on their own. I'm really proud of how this kit turned out, as it can serve as a crit hypercarry or a sustainer debuff applier if you build him with the high speed and EHR, and you can even play him as an SP positive sub DPS if you hit the debuff requirement, and you can potentially play him as an entanglement super breaker if you play something like Silverwolf, Fugue, Lingsha, Lingsha. So many playstyles for a character, but I somehow made it mathematically balanced as to not break any damage thresholds or completely power creep anyone. It's so magnificent, man. Anyway, my name is Kyte and thank you for watching. Leave a comment for your suggestions or what you do to fix Mono Quantum. See ya, peace.